What could make the greatest warrior alive refuse to fight the war he was born for? This is the story of a rage so great it shaped the fate of two nations. For 9 long years, the armies of Greece had camped on the shores below the city of Troy, unable to break its walls. It began, as legends say, when a Trojan prince stole away the most beautiful woman in the world. But the story you're about to hear isn't really about that stolen woman, or even about the war itself. It's about one man's pride and the terrible price of wounded honor. That man was Achilles, the greatest warrior the Greeks had ever produced. Half mortal, half divine, he moved through battle like a force of nature, and every soldier on both sides feared his name. Achilles wanted only one thing above all else: glory that would outlive him forever. He knew, through a prophecy, that if he fought at Troy, he would die young, but be remembered for all time. Leading the entire Greek army was Agamemnon, a proud and powerful king who commanded thousands of ships and men. He was Achilles' commander, but the two men respected each other far less than their soldiers assumed. Meanwhile, inside the besieged city stood Troy's greatest hope, Hector, a Trojan prince renowned for his courage and his devotion to his people. Unlike Achilles, Hector didn't fight for personal glory. He fought simply to protect his home. Hector's younger brother was Paris, a charming but reckless prince whose one selfish choice had started this entire catastrophic war. Years earlier, Paris had seduced and carried off Helen, the wife of a Greek king. That woman was Helen, now living inside Troy as Paris's wife, though she was haunted daily by the bloodshed her presence had caused. Her original husband, Menelaus, was out there on the battlefield leading part of the Greek army, desperate to win her back. And ruling over all of Troy was Priam, an aging king who had watched this war grind on for nearly a decade, burying friend after friend and fearing every day for the lives of his many sons. With all these players in place, the war had settled into a brutal stalemate. But everything was about to change because of a single argument that had nothing to do with the battlefield at all. During a raid, Agamemnon had taken a captive woman as his war prize, but he was soon forced to give her back to appease an angry god. Furious at the loss, he decided to take something from Achilles instead, his own captive woman, Briseis. For Achilles, this wasn't just about the woman. It was a public humiliation, a message that his honor meant nothing to the man he served. Enraged, he stormed away and swore he would never fight for Agamemnon again. Grieving and humiliated, Achilles turned to the one person who had always protected him, his mother, Thetis, a sea goddess who loved her mortal son fiercely. He begged her to help him make Agamemnon regret this insult. Thetis climbed Mount Olympus to plead with Zeus, king of all the gods, asking him to let the Trojans win victory after victory, so the Greeks would suffer for disrespecting her son. Zeus, who owed her a favor, agreed. And so, because of one man's wounded pride, the tide of an entire war was about to turn. With Achilles gone and the gods now favoring Troy, the Greek army was suddenly, dangerously vulnerable. Without Achilles leading the charge, the Greeks began losing ground fast. Hector, sensing his chance, led the Trojan army out from behind the walls with newfound confidence. Day after day, Hector pushed the Greeks back toward their own ships, something that had never happened before in 9 years of war. If the Trojans burned those ships, the Greeks would have no way home and no way to resupply. Watching all this from his tent, refusing to lift a spear, was Achilles. He had gotten exactly what he wanted, the Greeks suffering, but the cost was mounting higher than even he had expected. It was at this darkest hour that Patroclus stepped forward. Patroclus was Achilles' closest friend, a gentle and loyal companion who had grown up alongside him and understood him better than anyone alive. Patroclus couldn't bear to watch their fellow Greeks die anymore. He begged Achilles to at least let him borrow his famous armor and lead their men into battle, hoping that the mere sight of Achilles' armor would scare the Trojans back. Achilles agreed, but with one crucial condition. Patroclus was only to push the Trojans back from the ships, then return immediately. He was never, under any circumstance, to chase the enemy all the way to the walls of Troy. Wearing Achilles' famous armor, Patroclus rode out into battle, and it worked better than anyone imagined. The Trojans, believing the terrifying Achilles himself had returned, panicked and fled in disarray. Swept up in the thrill of victory, Patroclus forgot Achilles' warning entirely. He chased the retreating Trojans all the way back to the city walls, hungry to finish what he'd started. But this was exactly where Hector stood ready to defend his home. Believing he was finally facing Achilles himself, Hector met him head-on in single combat outside the gates. His friend was dead. Word reached the Greek camp that Patroclus was dead, and it was Achilles who received the news. In an instant, his rage at Agamemnon vanished, replaced by a grief so overwhelming that soldiers said his cries could be heard across the sea. Achilles now understood, too late, that his stubborn pride had cost him the person he loved most in the world. And in that grief, his fury found a new, singular target: Hector. He immediately reconciled with Agamemnon, the two men setting aside their old quarrel, because now there was something far greater at stake than either of their egos. Achilles was returning to war, and this time nothing would stop him. Because his old armor had been lost along with Patroclus, Thetis pleaded with the god of the forge to craft her son a magnificent new set of armor, unbreakable and gleaming, fit for the vengeance he intended to unleash. Clad in his new armor, Achilles charged back onto the battlefield like a man possessed. Every Trojan who crossed his path fell before him, and the once confident Trojan army began to break and scatter in terror. The Trojan army fled back within the safety of their city walls, all except one man. Hector remained outside alone, knowing exactly who was coming for him and why. From atop the walls, his father Priam begged him to come inside, warning that Achilles would show no mercy. Priam had already lost too many sons to this war and could not bear to watch another die. Hector's wife, Andromache, pleaded with him too, holding their infant son and begging him not to leave the boy fatherless. She had already dreamed of this day and dreaded it more than anything. But Hector knew that if he ran now, he would live in shame. And his people, watching from the walls, would lose all hope. So, with a heavy heart, he chose to stand his ground and face Achilles alone. But as Achilles drew near, sheer human terror overtook Hector after all, and he broke into a run, circling the entire city walls with Achilles chasing close behind him. Finally, tricked by a god disguised as his own brother into believing he had backup, Hector stopped running and turned to make his final stand. It was a trap, and Hector realized it only when he turned and found himself utterly alone. With no way out, Hector faced Achilles one final time, weapon raised, fighting for his family, his city, and his own name. Hector was dead, but Achilles' grief was not yet satisfied. In a final act of rage, he tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it across the battlefield in full view of the horrified city, refusing even to grant him a proper burial. Inside Troy, the grief was unbearable. Priam had lost his greatest son and protector, Andromache had lost her husband, and the entire city mourned the man who had held their walls for 9 long years. Desperate and heartbroken, old King Priam made an extraordinary decision. Under cover of night, with a god's help slipping him past the guards, he traveled alone into the enemy camp to beg the one man he should have feared most for his son's body gag. Priam entered Achilles' tent and did something no enemy had ever dared. He knelt and kissed the hands of the man who had killed his son and begged, father to father, for mercy. Something in Achilles finally broke. Looking at this grieving old man, he thought of his own father far away, and of Patroclus. And for the first time since his friend's death, he wept alongside his enemy instead of against him. Moved by shared grief, Achilles agreed to return Hector's body and even called a temporary truce so that Troy could properly mourn its fallen prince. The war's endless cruelty had, for one night, given way to something like compassion. Priam carried his son's body home, and all of Troy gathered for a funeral befitting the city's greatest hero. They burned his body, gathered his bones, and mourned him for 11 days, exactly as Achilles had promised. And there, with the burial of Hector, Homer's great poem comes to its close. The Iliad never actually shows us the fall of Troy or the death of Achilles himself, both of which the audience already knew from other legends. Instead, Homer chose to end his epic on this note of grief and grudging humanity, reminding us that even in the midst of the deadliest war ever told, enemies could still recognize each other's pain. In the end, Achilles got the glory he always wanted. His name would echo through history for 3,000 years. But the Iliad makes clear that the price of that glory, paid in the deaths of Patroclus, Hector, and countless others, was almost too heavy to bear.